Hi, I'm Pete Shau. You may know me from the RTO Show podcast, but today I'm doing something a little bit different. APRO and WOW Brands have launched a special project to bring the story of our industry to life like never before. They've asked me to sit down with some of the true legends of rent-to-own, capturing their stories, their impact, and their vision for the future. And now I get to share those conversations with you straight from the legends themselves. All of this leads to something groundbreaking, though. A new book, The Rent-to-Own Revolution, A Definitive History of Advocacy and Consumer Access, written by APRO CEO Charles Smitherman and WOW Brands CEO Brian Krast. The book explores the grassroots of RTO, the advocacy that has defined it, and the future that we're building together. Here's where you come in. We're giving away free copies once the book is released. Just head over to the RTORevolution.com and sign up for a chance to receive a copy in early 2026. Don't miss the chance to be among the first to hold this piece of RTO history. That's RTORevolution.com. Check it out and become a part of RTO history. Hello and welcome to the RTO Show podcast. I'm your host, Pete Shau. Today, we have another Legend Series interview. And listen, this one is a little bit different because I have to meet what I would consider is a legend of my current day, talking about a legend of that's already come through, and John Cleek and John Cleek Jr. The Tiger moniker, I think, just follows you guys everywhere, and it's amazing. But you know, I'm talking to John Cleek Jr. right now about Senior and some of the amazing things that he's done. You guys both have a legendary career, but today we're gonna do the Legend Series some justice. We're gonna talk about Dad a little bit and some of the things that he's been able to do in his long esteemed career through the mind and eye set of his son, who does an amazing job. We were just talking about this earlier, who can also dance Michael Jackson very, very well. I'll give you that. So how you doing, John? How's everything going today?
Oh, I'm doing great, Pete. Just getting ready for Christmas and spending some awesome time with our family.
You know, we were talking about that earlier, and I'll say you were very blessed. I've seen your family on the commercials that you did. Amazing. It was beautiful to see. And it's kind of like why we're here today, right? We're talking about family. We're talking about, you know, where you came from and some of the direction that you've taken from your father, who did an amazing job in this industry and then kind of set you on your way. Talk to me a little bit. How did Cleek's RTO get started? Because I know that Elmo was a part of that as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, Cleek's was founded back in 1956. My late grandparents, Clifton Elmo Cleek, and my grandmother, Wilma Cleek, started the business. As actually known as Cleek's Appliance and Food Service. My grandfather, there was a business down the road called Wilson's Meat Market, and my grandfather rented the back wall from Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson would basically sell them, you know, the meat, and then my grandfather would sell them in a Manna freezer, and then they had a local community bank that financed the whole deal over like 2 years. So that's kind of how it got started. And so it's Cleek's Appliance and Food Service. And then about 3 years later, there was a building on 1000 West Broadway. It's still there today, the building, and my grandfather purchased that building, and it was a couple thousand square feet, but certainly much bigger than what they had before. And then they started expanding the line, more appliances, more electronics, and so forth. And of course, everything was, you know, retail back then, obviously. And then back in 1973, there was another location a couple blocks away at 1000 West Worley here in Columbia. And it was an old grocery store. It was like 6,000 or 7,000 square feet. And over the summer, like in August, basically they moved the whole store and set up the whole new store over the course of a weekend. And then, you know, 9 o'clock Monday morning, they're open for business, you know. And then
wow.
My grandfather, of course, you know, I'll get to this here in a second. I didn't get to know him very well, but, you know, he was an ultimate promoter, you know, much like my dad, and I try to be today as well, too. But, you know, they had a huge grand opening event. I mean, they had the mayor, they had the head football coach back then was Al Onofrio. They had a little band, the Golden Girls. I mean, it was a big time event. The community came out, supported it. Wow. That was in August of 73. I was 2 years old, so I was there. I think I was doing a couple of drawings or something, but, and then unfortunately, and, my grandfather and of course my dad and, you know, big, big Missouri Tiger fans and love to quail hunt and all kinds of other stuff too. So my grandfather was up with a friend of his. They'd taken a small plane up to Ames, Iowa, and for a quail hunting trip and then the Missouri Tiger game. And then unfortunately on the way back on November the 19th of 73, got into bad weather and the other pilot wasn't instrument rated and they ended up flying the plane in the ground and killed both of them. And, my dad was 23 years old. I was only 2 years old. And there wasn't any, it wasn't any money or anything like that. It was just, obviously it was total devastation for my father. He lost his best friend, lost his dad, lost his business partner and his hero and everything. But, there wasn't any quitting my father. There wasn't any other options either. I mean, he just had to figure out a way to make it work.
Right.
So he kept it going. He was Cleek's Appliances and, kept the business running for obviously a long time. But back then, it was devastating. His mother's still alive and then he had an older sister and a younger sister too. But that's kind of how everything got started and so forth with the business.
So Dad was kind of thrust into it and he did everything that he had to do to kind of make amends for his family, make sure everything was going, and then turned it into what it is today. Because I mean, you guys have a following in Missouri that is second to none. I can't think of a person in Missouri or the Missouri area or around your stores that don't know the Cleek name, especially your face, but the Cleek name. And so, it's important to see that, family is always a driver, right? Whether you want to take care of them, whether you want to make sure that they have, or you want to make sure to take care of their future, that drives. And it says a lot that your father was able to come out of that and be able to create more from what that was. Because at that point you're saying it was, and I got to say a little off camera here, but you have the memory of you have the ability to say addresses and dates and times. Listen, at 2 years old, I couldn't remember anything, but as you come through and I know the information comes later, but you have the ability to just quote names and times and dates. And I mean, like nobody's business. And I love when I talk to you because you're so detailed about that. But so out of this tragedy, Cleeks goes to Dad and together at some point in time, because I know that there's a time frame where you're still kind of growing up and getting through this, you develop and grow out to more. So how was it, how did it go from Dad's one store location where you guys are just going through this and kind of making it happen, getting through the transition and the pain of what happened, and then grow it more and become more a part of the community?
Sure. So, well, as far as remembering the dates and some of that other stuff, I mean, I wish I could have remembered stuff back in school. I would have done me a lot better, but I'm full of all kinds of information that doesn't matter a whole lot in some ways. But anyhow, no, my grandfather had two rules to the company we still use today, and then we added a third rule. My grandfather's number one rule of our company is never say anything you have to remember. So basically, if you always tell the truth, it always comes back to you. And then his second rule is get bigger, get better, or get out. And then the other rule that we adopted was, the golden rule of treat everyone the way you want to be treated. Okay, so those are our three rules that we run our company by. We try to live our life by, and, are we perfect? No, but we try to adhere to those the best that we can. So, again, it was all retail. My dad also got into the carpet business a little bit as well. He pretty much hated that business, though, because he couldn't stand dealing with the carpet installers and everything else, and it just wasn't his thing. When I was a kid, I kind of got started in this thing. I went to school down the road and I'd walk down from school and we had all these rolls of carpet all over the floor. And I mean, I'm a little kid crawling all over the carpet and just not doing anything super productive other than just being a kid. But then once I got a little bit older, I started coming down, vacuuming the floor, clean some stuff, put TV stands together and stuff like that. Stuff you can do when you're 14, 15 years old, whatever. My father always worked with his dad. He just knew that's what he wanted to do, and his dad always worked, and if he wanted to see his father, they probably need to work together. My dad was the best salesman that I ever saw in my life, and, according to all the conversations that I've had with my dad in the past, his dad, Elmo, he was the best that he'd ever seen. There's a lot of good stories. My dad, but back in the day, he knew all the product knowledge. He knew, what the competitors had, what their pricing was. I mean, he pretty well knew everything, and they couldn't afford to miss a sale back then either, because it was all
Right.
about survival. And I'd like to think we could have that same mentality today, but that's probably not necessarily reality. But nonetheless, I know there's one time, my dad's sitting there telling this one customer everything about this, I don't know, washer, or dryer, or whatever it was, and just kept going on and going on and going on. And he'd probably already closed his sale about 5 times. And then his dad comes over to him and slips him a little note. And, I can't really say what was on the note, but you can probably take a guess. And about, 2 seconds later, he's like, "Yes, sir." And, "Hey, Mr. Smith, let's go get written up on this washer dryer," so, but, my dad, he could do everything in the store when he was, 14, 15 years old, except drive the truck. So there was a lot of times, customers would be like, "Hey, can we get this TV delivered tonight?" And he's like, "Well, yes, sir, I'll get it to you. But, do you mind driving the truck? Because I can't drive."
Oh my, wow. That's dedication. That's dedication. Listen, I'll get it to you. Just help me out.
And my family was everything. My grandfather coached my dad in Little League baseball, and my grandfather was one of the co-founders of Daniel Boone Little League here in Columbia, Missouri. And so, if he didn't have anybody to run the store while my dad had a game, I mean, he'd literally just put a sign on the door saying, "Gone to the ballpark for 2 hours and be back later." So, they didn't miss baseball, didn't miss Missouri Tiger football. But it was all about family and all about work, taking care of customers.
That's something that I've always admired. And I know that you and Heather always have kind of brought that tradition up to today, always being the fans and making sure that you guys represent your teams out there. And I love that. So talking about the expansion, there was a little bit of expansion. I know that at some point in time, there was an expansion into a different franchise. We did Aaron's. Apparently it didn't work out because you guys are back to Cleek, still kind of representing the home team. What was the difference in that you decided, you know what, we're going to go back to doing what we did? Because you guys have a really strong bond with your community. You probably do more community events in a year than people that I know who probably do it in 10 years. I mean, you're just always raising money. You guys are always out there doing what you need to do, whether it be ALS, whether anything. And you guys represent your company and your community very, very well. But, as a franchise, it's a little bit different. I mean, they have like these cookie cutter kind of things. You got to follow these rules and stuff like that. Was that some of the reason why you decided to go back to Cleeks, and why didn't it stay that way?
Yeah, I kind of take you full circle on the expansion, backing up a little bit. So again, following, the get bigger, get better, get out, my dad made the decision, retail business had kind of gone flat in the mid 80s. And then the Columbia Mall here had opened up, and there was a Sears retail store and so forth. So retail had kind of gone flat. My dad was kind of dabbled in the rent-own business in the mid to late 70s, but then made the decision to get into rent-own full-fledged back in 1987. The only way he figured this was going to work is that we had to expand. So we opened up our second store, and we were still Cleeks, of course, back then. It opened up in 1988 in Fulton, Missouri. And then in 1989, we opened up in Mexico. And then, let's see, in 95, we opened up another store here in Columbia, Missouri. And then we opened up in Boonville, so that gave us 5. In 1998, we opened up in Jeff City, Missouri. And then 2000, we opened up in Moberly. So that gave us 7. And then back in 2006, we opened up in Marshall and Sedalia, which is about an hour or so west of Columbia. But my dad, big TV marketer, and looked at ADA, area dominant influence, TV and where, our local stations would hit and so forth. And he kind of drew these rings around a map. And these 9 locations basically, checked the box for him, kind of where we wanted to be. So it's 2006. Things are rolling along pretty well. We We owned a 14,000 square foot warehouse. My dad and I
Oh,
owned
wow.
50/50. We'd owned another strip center in Sedalia. But then, this other competitor called, Aaron's was coming along. And, well, they'd already been around for a long time. They had, much similar kind of starting out, honestly, as kind of our company. Of course, the late, great Charlie Loudermilk. They started in 1955, renting folding chairs, and then of course just built it into a little, multi-billion-dollar business. But
Just a little one, just a little one.
so, but anyhow, I can't really say that about Cleeks. We're working on it though. But anyway,
No, you guys are doing great. You guys are doing
uh,
great.
Aaron's was in a couple of our markets. Obviously not like we're, afraid of competition or, it's natural. Everybody's got to compete against each other. But, they were starting to come into one of our other markets. We were already competing against them in two or three markets. We could kind of tell that, the writing was on the wall that eventually they're probably going to be in all of our markets. And, they had kind of approached us. Robert Briley in Abilene, Texas had contacted my father. I think he called about everybody in the country at one point. But anyway, and he came down here and, my little Robert Briley, Tiger, just, come on down to Texas and I'll show you how it works. And you just got to see the system, Tiger. It's something else. And then so we came down there to Texas and I got to admit, it was a hell of a system. It probably still is today. I'm glad I'm not in it, but nonetheless, it was a great system. It was better than what we had at the time. We were a 53-year company. It was not an easy decision to make. We definitely didn't take it lightly, but seemed like a family thing to us at the time. They had some buyback guarantees. We, thought we were getting into this national buying power and all this other stuff. And then plus on top of that, we'd take out our biggest competitor at the time. And it's kind of like the old, if you can't beat them, join them mentality, I guess. So that's pretty
Yeah.
much what the decision was to go to Aaron's. And in December 1 of 2008, we converted our company to Aaron's. So, we still always maintain, though, the Cleeks is now Aaron's. We always kept Cleeks as part of it.
Right.
And, arguably, I'll just say it like it is. My dad is, he was very hard headed. Hell, I'm hard headed. We probably really weren't the greatest franchisees to some degree because, we've been doing this forever ourselves and
Right.
they have
Right.
all these other people coming in to, telling you to do this, telling you to do that. And again, we still use a lot of the same things that we did back as Aaron's today. There's some of the same policies that we use today that we think were very good. But then, and we grew like crazy. But when you give up that 6%, it's a pretty big number.
Yeah.
And then we just never really could overcome that. And we had several stores that did well. We had a couple that didn't. But at the end of the day, we ended up selling one of our stores to a friend of ours, Larry Carrico. We sold the Mobley store to rent one. In Columbia, we had two stores, and we own the real estate here in one of them. The other one we leased, and we just decided, you had to do all these big major upgrades and all this kind of stuff, and they're really pretty expensive. We just decided to kind of improve efficiencies or whatever and combine everything into one store. Also, when we did the deal, there was another franchisee in the area, and we tried to buy him out, but he didn't want to sell out at the time, so it involved us having to sell a store or two, merge a store, buy a store. It was a little bit messy and complicated, but we made it all work for a while and so forth. But then, there's some things that, obviously transpired with, Mr. Loudermilk kind of retired. And then Ken Butler, of course, was the COO of Aaron's. And, when he was there, the thing was growing and going. And he obviously is a legend in this business, and we have a lot of respect for him. He definitely was never lacking a lot of confidence.
I love Ken Butler. KB is like one of my favorite people. Yeah.
But then he kind of left, and they had a couple of other CEOs come through. There was one of them that couldn't even explain who our customer was. I mean, if we
Oh
felt
God.
that was kind of surprising. And then
Yeah.
another CEO came in, and Aaron's had made the decision to buy out Progressive Leasing.
Mhm.
And so then we kind of, there's a lot of the franchisees that weren't really happy about that. Um, so, at the end of the day, it's about 2017 or so now. And my dad and I were at an Aaron's franchise meeting. There was some things that were said, and we just kind of looked at each other and decided that, this just really isn't for us. This was a 10-year agreement.
Right.
Um, and, I probably a lot of things I could say, but probably shouldn't say. So, but they, I'll say this, Aaron's was very cordial with us. A guy named Scott Harvey, who was the VP of franchise at the time, and Julie Scott, they were very great to work with. They made it very easy for us, and we were able to exit. And then as you'll know on my dates, on September the 10th of
There you go.
2018,
There you go.
we converted back to Cleeks, and it's been Cleeks ever since. So, and it'll be Cleeks until it's not Cleeks anymore. But
Until it's not
nonetheless,
Cleeks, right?
so, and then, there's been, some other, franchisees that have decided to exit the Aaron's plan as well since that time. And I'm not going to speak for them, but, and then, but again, I'll say this. I don't have anything bad to say about it. It was a learning experience. It, ultimately, we didn't get into it to get out of it,
Right.
but ultimately we decided that it wasn't the best fit for us. And again, they were cordial in letting us get out. And so be it. That's where we're at.
Hey everyone, it's Pete Shau here from the RTO Show podcast, and I want to tell you about a company that's making a real difference in the rent-to-own space. Wow Brands. I've seen firsthand how they approach marketing. And let me tell you, it's not just about ads. Wow Brands builds complete digital ecosystems designed specifically for the rent-to-own industry. Their e-commerce and lead generation strategies are built to bring in qualified leads. And did I mention that they are actively working with the rent-to-own industry while also being members of APRO and TRIB? Listen, these folks are passionate problem solvers. They don't just slap something together. They design, build, and scale the kind of digital retail tools your business needs and your customers actually want. So if you're serious about growing, reach out to Wow Brands at wowbrands.com. I trust them, and I think you will too. Well, so during this time, as you're going through this, right? So we're trying to expand. We've got a bunch of stores. You're going either into or out of the Aaron's franchise. There's a lot going on between you and Dad. You guys are sharing the reins, so to speak, I would imagine. Where do you find time to be on the APRO board as the president? How did he find time to do that with everything that was going on? I mean, he, not only did he do that, but you guys also are very, very into the Missouri Rental Dealers Association as well. So you're not only, in APRO on a whole level, you guys are an MRDA, which is huge.
So my dad joined first of all, I back up. He started the Missouri Rental Dealers Association, him and another gentleman named John Thompson. They started it back in 1987, November, and a group of rental dealers all got together. There's a gentleman named Dave Egan, who is an attorney for Rent-A-Center, had called my father and said, hey, I need you to get, the rental dealers together. We got to get a state association formed there in Missouri. So they all got together, and then they had hired a lobbyist, a guy named John Britton. And, Mr. Britton was a legend in the Capitol in Jefferson City, Missouri. He's kind of like the only guy I think that's ever been allowed to smoke inside the Capitol and everything. Anyway, he gets together with the group of rental dealers, and then like in June of 88, they're having a subcommittee hearing down in the Capitol, and my dad's down there with a bunch of other dealers, and John Britton's going on about our rent-to-own statute, and my dad's looking at this other guy, and he's like, is anything this guy's talking about sound like anything that we really do in this business? And he's like, no, not really, but just let him go. He's got these guys spinning in circles. They don't know what to think, so he'll get it done. Don't worry about it. And in June of 1988, we had a state law passed in Missouri. It's a very favorable law. Missouri's a very favorable business climate. So, and then MRDA was formed. My dad was a an MRDA president. He was on the board, the whole time until his passing. He's always been a member of APRO. We're a 40-year APRO member now.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
back in 1998, my dad ran for the APRO board and got elected. And then, back in 2008, he got elected as president. And so, yeah, just in the midst of, we're changing over our entire business to this new thing and errands. And then my dad's the president of APRO. And then on top of that, they're right in the middle of trying to get federal legislation passed. I mean, they were, as close as they had ever been. We had a representative in the House out of St. Louis, Missouri, named Lacey Clay. He's a great guy, and he represented our industry very well. He was a liberal Democrat, but he loved our business because he really saw the value that we provide, to his constituents. And he got fully behind it. He came to our, LegCon, I believe. He was probably at the APRO session at one point or another too. But when my dad was the president, and there was a lot of lobbyists involved, and of course Ed Wynn, Bill Keese, all this, and a lot of people working on this. But my dad, literally from sun up to sundown, was working on APRO, working on trying to get this federal legislation passed. And they ended up getting more co-sponsors in the House than they'd ever had before. And then it actually passed through the House. And then they got to the Senate, and it died and didn't go anywhere. But it wasn't from a hell of a lot of effort, especially on my dad's part. But literally him and Ed Wynn were talking all the time, different lobbyists and so forth, John Raffaelli, I believe, and so forth. So there was a lot of effort put on federal legislation by my dad. Unfortunately, that didn't ever happen. But it's kind of amazing how at the state level, we can get a bill passed in 6 or 7 months, and then at the federal level, all we really need is some type of a definition bill that'll say, rent to own is a lease, not a credit sale, and, millions and millions of dollars and tons of trips to DC and a bunch of people working on it, and 25, 30 something years later, still nothing. But, that was a big thing. And of course, also the other thing that was a big legacy for my dad, and really I'd say was his legacy, was the state associations. My dad, he saw the need. He felt that this is a grassroots thing. It's we got all these dealers all over the country. Everybody's trying to start this, start that, and do their own thing. And we kind of had this already developed in Missouri. We had a great executive director from Missouri, a guy named Ken Steiner. My dad hired him, and he ran our trade show for years. We had a lot of great board members. We had the late Mark Windsor, with Dan Cole, Gary Romine, Chuck Kaluva. And then I think I joined the board in about 2001 or so, kind of started getting involved at the state level on the board, and then, went through the ranks, vice president, then became president, and did that for a while and so forth. But no, my dad, he would travel at his own expense from coast to coast, reorganizing these state associations. And a lot of times, Ed Wynn would go with him. And, my one thing my dad's very proud of, is that, back in 1998, there was like 10 state associations, I believe. And then there was a really nice article written in the APRO magazine back in 2010. And by that point in time, there was like 37 state associations.
Wow.
Okay. And my dad had a really big part in helping get those off the ground, or, revamped or what have you. And I know there was a time, I think in Georgia, my dad had to go there a couple different times, but he didn't really sugarcoat things a whole lot. But he basically said, listen, I don't know what the hell we need to do. If we need to, put a chain on the door or put armed guards at the door or whatever, but we're not leaving here until we've got a president, a vice president, and a board of directors. So I've been here twice, and you guys are going to get this fixed today. And that's pretty much where, the Tiger comes out too at times.
There you go.
But, like I've I was talking to my good friend, David, who, of course, has served this industry forever in all kinds of different capacities. And, the one thing that he said about my dad was that, Tiger was the perfect president for the time of what we needed. And,
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. And, he always promoted the state associations.
Yeah.
And I talked to Bill Keith too. And, he just, basically said the Tiger was always true to himself, always, honest with everybody. And, my dad gave his heart and soul to this industry. I mean, he obviously, first and foremost, he loves God, he loves his family, but, APRO's our second family. And we have some of our best friends in this industry, vendors, other dealers. Even though maybe the Aaron's thing didn't work out for us ultimately, but some of my best friends in this industry are Aaron's franchisees, so no, it's been a great ride for us. It was a great ride for my dad. We're proud of a lot of different things, but, again, the state associations were certainly first and foremost to his heart. And then my dad received several awards that are really important in the industry. His first award that he got was back in 1996. He was recognized as the Rental Dealer of the Year. And then in 2016, he received the Ernie Talley Lifetime Achievement Award, which is the highest honor you can receive at APRO.
That's it. All right.
And then, as you know, my father was diagnosed with ALS in June 4th of 2020. And, we kind of kept it under wraps for a while for whatever reasons. But then, as it kind of got to the point, with ALS, which is a, crappy disease, I definitely don't recommend it. But, he started losing his functions, couldn't speak as clearly, so forth. And so he decided to go ahead and use his celebrity status here in town to kind of be the spokesperson for ALS. And we got involved with the ALS Association and everything. Back in 2021, APRO decided to honor my father with coming up with the RTO Tiger Award. So my dad was the first recipient of that. And and then I've presented the award ever since. And then, so one of the coolest moments though, and I'll say this, like I say, the very first year we did the ALS walk, we formed Team Tiger, and that was back when my father was, still alive. So there was a lot of emotion, a lot of support throughout the industry, all over the country. And, we raised like, I don't know, $90,000 or something that first year, for the walk here in Columbia, which was huge. But I know I was standing on the stage at an APRO event, and we kind of did a video, and even though it's probably a little bit reluctant for some of my friends in Kansas to say this, but they still did it on behalf of my father. But I got everybody to, give a big MIZZOU, we love you, Tiger. Showed that to my dad, and obviously that was pretty special.
Oh, absolutely. You mentioned so many times a lot of leadership, a lot of times that he has dealt and done different things, whether it's the accolades that he's gotten from APRO, whether it's being a part of an MRDA, whether it's being on the board of APRO. That's a lot of leadership. Did he have people that he collaborated with, people that, mentored him on the way up? Or was he just one of those guys that was like, he just led his own way?
Well, of course, first and foremost, his number one mentor was his father, but, he lost him at an early age at 23. There was another gentleman, of course, he's passed away quite a ways back, but a gentleman named Hartley Banks, who was a banker. He owned a local bank here in town, and he was one of my grandfather's best friends. And he kind of took my dad under his wings. And Hartley was he was a character. There's no doubt about it. He kind of liked to have a few cocktails, maybe, and he was a little gruff, but I know there was I don't know what this guy was. He was a business analyst or something, but my dad was talking to him about this rent-to-own thing. Back in the day, this guy kept going on and on and on about, in the event of this and the event of that and blah, blah, blah. And Hartley finally just told this guy to shut the hell up and listen. I just know, Tiger, If he can't figure it out, then he'll be smart enough to get the hell out of it. But you just shut your butt up and he'll figure it out. And that's kind of how that went. And, um, but yeah, Hartley, again, a little bit rough, but he was, another very honest person to the day was long. And, he'd do anything for you, but he was definitely one of my dad's best friends. There's another gentleman that is still alive that's a mentor to me. I have lunch with him every week. We had lunch today, actually, and he was a good friend of my father, but a guy named Bill Schultz, he owned a local Culligan water distributorship here in town, and a very successful businessman and great guy. And so he was a good mentor to my father as well, too. So, and to me as well.
So, talking about Hartley, it's kind of funny that it comes up this way. How involved were you and Dad when it came down to the Heartland Expo, with the way you guys did, what you do, the fact that you guys have this every year and it's this big gathering of everybody it has just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger every year. How involved was Dad in that? And then where did it transition off to you?
Yeah, I mean, my dad was really involved in it starting out. And again, I mentioned a lot of the names in the past, but, we had a really good board of directors. Ken Steiner's the one that pretty well organized the show, as far as dealing with the vendors and making sure they got registered and everything. So Ken did a lot of the work and deserves, a lot of the credit. But I mean, you got to have a leader, in any state association or any business. You got to have somebody that's got that passion to make it want to work. And, these, people just show up to these trade shows or whatever and just think this, just happens, and it's like, no, you kind of work on this stuff for, 6 months or something or whatever to make it happen. But, no, my dad was very involved. And, originally it was the MRDA show. Okay. And then we did that for, I don't know, probably 10 years. So we'd have, 25, 30 vendors show up, a little bit smaller venue at a hotel. And then we've kind of, you were there last year, but we've always kind of now been at the Lodge of the Four Seasons. And you see the big exhibit hall that we have and everything. We're able to get about 70 booths in there or so. And the vendors do come with product. And, that's kind of the opportunity for our managers that's kind of their, trib show or their APRO show or whatever, because most of us can't afford to send our people to those national events. So, and then, I want to say 15, probably 20 years ago, we started the Heartland concept. I don't remember if that was kind of something at my direction or my father or the board in general, but we just kind of think, again, get bigger, get better, get out. We got to get this thing. We got other states involved that are right around us, and Kansas, Arkansas, so forth, Illinois, let's put on a bigger show. And they're more than welcome to attend. And, that did pay off for quite a few years. And, last year was probably our best show that one of the best shows we ever had. A couple of years ago, well, of course, with COVID, that kind of screwed everything up. We had to cancel the show and we tried to come back the following year. And I think we did come back with a show. We had to delay it a different time of year. Wasn't quite as great. But then each and every year since then, we've gotten back to where we were. Ken Steiner did retire about 3 years ago. He tried to retire quite a few times. We'd never let him. But he did finally retire, and him and his wife, Laura, they actually live in Mexico. I don't remember the name of the town exactly, but they're in Mexico, and they're having fun down there. But thankfully, and we were at a little bit of a crossroads. I mean, my father had passed away. Mark Windsor had passed away. Ken retires. Dan Cole sells out. Gary Romine sells out. Chuck Kaluva sells out. We lost some pretty heavy hitters on our board. Fortunately, Macy Mitchell and his mom, Liz Mitchell, and Scott, but they own All-American Rental in Springfield area. And they decided to kind of try to take on. Macy's also an executive director for the Republic Chamber of Commerce. So he's very good at getting in front of cameras and taking pictures of himself and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, it's because he's always pumped up.
Yeah,
he's always pumped up. Yeah, I know. He does an amazing job.
I'm like the before picture and Macy's the after. But he, but they're a great family, and Scott was the president for 4 years, and then he kind of wanted to step away from that, so I got back in the saddle and probably president until I guess I don't want to be anymore. Or if somebody else wants to do it, they can. But no, they stepped in, and they've run the show now for 3 years, and they learn a little bit each year too. But uh, no, they're doing a fantastic job organizing the event, and we're not missing a beat. I think it's June 9th through the 11th next year. And, but, it's not easy, to keep this thing going. And, I definitely think we got one of the best state associations in the country.
Yes.
Ohio also runs a excellent, Midwest Training Expo, and their show's set up a little bit differently. I've been out there before to it. Haven't been in 15 years or so, but, they're more based on the training aspect of it. We try to incorporate a little bit of everything. We have a bass tournament, we have a golf tournament, we have a social event called the Tiger Social. We have a little event up in my suite. I make some pretty awesome chocolate martinis, and
Yes, I can attest to that. I can attest to that. It was really good. I enjoyed that.
yeah, and then we have a full-blown trade show for 5 hours. And this year we did, I think, almost right at $1 million. And then the following day, we have a couple vendors do some product training. And then you were nice enough to come and do a panel discussion this year, and that was very beneficial. And we always try to have an industry person come in, because just think that's always a lot more beneficial to everybody, to have somebody that's, that knows what it's like to do a delivery, that's what it's like to do a collection call, than just some motivational speaker that you're going to pay $5,000 to, and you're going to forget everything they said an hour later. And
Yeah, I agree. No, I totally understand. Listen, I loved being a part of it. It was great. It was great being able to be there, meet everybody. Macy does an amazing job. It was great to meet him and see everybody in action. I've always wanted to see it, and I heard about it, but I never got a chance, an opportunity to go. So going as a show was probably one of my my check offs. I was able to say my list of things that I wanted to get done, so I can say it was a great job. And so here you are at all these retirements. Everything is changing. It puts you in the forefront. You've done a very good job of not only being but taking it by the reins and kind of doing your own thing, and really kind of shining your own light on how you do it, which is, I got to say, amazing. As we come to the end, how do you see your father's legacy in this industry? Because you have seen it from both sides. You've seen it growing up, you've seen it working with him, and now you get to see it after he's already made his mark and he's gone. How do you see your father's legacy in everything that you do and everything that you've done in this industry?
yeah, that's a great question. Again, my father was one of these kind of guys that was extremely passionate. He loved, anything he was going to do, he was going to put 100% into it with his heart, honesty, everything else. He definitely believed in what we do in this business, and serving customers and improving their lives with our products, services that we, give our customers and everything. And, you want to get a group of people together that, want to come together, back in the '80s and so forth, when there was some tax stuff came up in this industry. And then you got some other Congress people trying to pass negative legislation and put us out of business or drastically change how we do business. Just get a group of very passionate people together, and they'll show you how to get that turned around. And, my father was, one of the leaders in that group. And, he bled red, of course, but he bled the black and gold from Missouri, and he bled APRO. I mean, we've always been an APRO member. And, again, like I said, it's our second family. And, again, my dad's legacy in this industry is the state associations, the grassroots, a lot of stuff happens in Washington, D.C. and all that kind of stuff. But you got to make sure you got business taken care of at home first. And, we've got, I think, 47 state laws. And so for the most part, we've got a pretty safe environment to do business in this industry. But of course, that can always change with elections and things. But right now, I feel pretty confident in where we're at. But, my dad, he loved being in the stores. He loved talking to our customers. I remember There was probably a time 25 plus years ago or so, we were in a store in Mexico, Missouri. There was a young man that was in a wheelchair, and he had one of those, he had a keyboard, and he had kind of like a stick deal on his head that he had to use to kind of talk through the keyboard. And he was having a problem with his television or something, and, just watching everything this young man was going through and everything. And I just looked at my father and I said, can we just give this guy a television? And he's like, absolutely, you bet we will. And I know there's another story with, a lady had paid off her account, and, my dad came around the counter and just told her how proud he was of her for that and congratulated her on paying off the account. And the lady just kind of started to break down in tears. She's like, Mr. Cleek, I've never had anybody in my life tell me they were proud of me.
Oh, wow.
So just that, you know, way about him, just making people feel good about themselves. You knew everything with my dad was genuine. It was from the heart. Sometimes there was obviously some tough conversations, but my dad liked to cut up. He liked to have fun. He had a good group of friends in this business. He put everything, he had into it. And he loved the rent-to-own business. Probably wishes he would have got into it a little bit earlier, back in the 70s, a little bit more than the retail, but such is life, you live and learn. So, but then, the best thing for me was the opportunity that I got to work with my father. I guess I could have gone and done anything else that I wanted to do as well too, but I decided, I worked all through high school and through college. I knew that I was going to work with my dad. So when I graduated from college in 93, became the manager of the store. And then, we had started to open up some more stores after that point in time and really started to expand and everything. So, I got the blessing to work with my father for 35 years.
Yeah.
One great thing about, this industry, is, and I guess you mentioned some other mentors and things, but we could pick up the phone and call about anybody in this business. And we got a lot of great friends, and they're willing to share ideas, we're willing to help each other out. We have seminars and trade shows, and we all get in the same room, and some of us might compete against each other or whatever, but we're still trying to help each other out, because we know at the end of the day, we're all here to serve our customers. We're all here to make our team members better so they can provide better service to our customers. And, that's 100% what my father believed in. We love seeing customers own washers and dryers and mattresses and other products. Our company mission statement that I came up with, a couple years ago, but it's to make a positive impact in the communities we serve and to improve the quality of life for our customers and team members. And, we've tried to do that, every day, but, we do some things within our community, whether it's bowling for autism tournament or an ALS walk or donating TVs to a local youth group, or, we've provided, turkey Thanksgiving dinners to 6 of our customers at each store. So we helped make, 30 of our customers' Thanksgiving meal a lot better.
Yeah.
My wife, Heather, was very instrumental in helping to orchestrate. We adopted 2 families, I believe, at each one of our stores to provide Christmas for those families.
Oh, wow.
Just giving back to the community, supporting those that support us, are all things that my father taught me. And then I don't do a lot of things right, but one thing I am pretty good at, I'll admit, is raising money for organizations. I always joke I can raise money for every organization except my own. You need, like I'm kind of the guy now at APRO events, when it's time to raise money, they give me the microphone. So I'm not afraid to put myself out there a little bit and everything, but, you gotta have some fun with it. We got a good group of people in this industry. A lot of people have made quite a bit of money, and everybody is very generous, understands the mission, understands the cause. One of the great things that APRO's done is the scholarship fund, to help support kids going to college so they can chase their dreams. And, all 3 of my kids were recipients of APRO scholarships. So we appreciated that. And We support a scholarship in my dad's name every year. And then, they got the disaster relief fund. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of hurricanes and windstorms and other tragic events that have affected our team members and other or APRO members and stuff. So, we're all family. There's a lot of great family businesses at APRO. Too many to mention, but I mean, it just, again, I got the opportunity to work with my father. I tell any of my friends, they've still got the opportunity to work with your dad, to cherish every day, cherish every moment.
You know what I will say, John? I don't think the apple falls far from the tree. I see a lot of your passion. I see a lot of your leadership. I see a lot of your interconnectivity to the community, to the people that you serve all the time. I see it in you all the time. And it's amazing when you get to say some of those things. And it's great because I got to see the magazine that finally came out with Chris Boland on the front, and the pages. You have those shining faces of some of the people that APRO has been able to touch with those scholarships. So that was great to see. But my last question, I really want to ask this to you because, I didn't get to ask this to you the first time we had your first interview, and now we're talking about Dad. But this one is really about you. You don't fall far from the tree. I see a lot of what he had in him in the way you represent yourself, the way you represent your company and your family. How is it to be able to do what you do and follow in your father's footsteps and be a success in the community and be a pillar of the communities that you serve?
Yeah, well, again, fortunately, my mom, Ann Cleek, who's still alive, and, my father, they were tremendous parents to me and gave me a lot of love. I had a great upbringing and everything, so I'm first give a lot of credit to them. I've got a wonderful wife, Heather. We've worked together for the last 5 years.
Heather's amazing. I love Heather. She's amazing.
So she's obviously a very generous person as well, too, and loving heart and everything. And then, we have, some long tenured team members, been with us 30 plus years and everything. So, I just decided a long time ago that, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it the best that I can, going to jump in, 100%. Some of the stuff that we've gotten involved with has, in reality kind of been through a personal reason or whatever. So like, for example, we have 3 adult children and then a son-in-law and a daughter-in-law, but our son Johnny's 30, and then our daughter Mary's 28, and then our youngest son Thomas is 26, and he has mild autism. So, and Heather has a master's in early childhood education and so forth.
Oh, wow.
So she really utilized that a lot when it came to Thomas and so forth. But, so to say that, so we got involved with the Autism Association here in the area, Easter Seals Midwest, what's called now. But, and then, I saw the need, they needed to raise funds so they could provide better services. So started a Bowling for Autism tournament 22 years ago. They've since renamed it the Cleek Family Bowling for Autism Tournament. So that's kind of a nice honor.
Amazing.
Proud to say that, in the 22 years I've been doing this, I've raised over $600,000 for that organization. And then, of course, we got involved, our local church, so we do there, the school, our kids went to a local Catholic high school, and, it was kind of one of those from the ground up deals. And so we got involved with that and helped raise some money in different events there. The food bank, we're very instrumental, try to help out the food bank. And then, then kind of got involved with ALS, and still, raising money for them today. Of course, not near to the impact that, I used to back when my dad was still alive, but we still raise about $10,000 for him a year. And we, probably raised, I don't know, around 150 or so thousand since we got involved. And, I just find the time to make it work. I mean, some of the times it comes at the sacrifice of my business, which isn't always good, but, I'm a strong believer in trying to make other people's lives better, giving back to the community. And, but I mean, to be honest with you, if I didn't have a son that had autism, would I have gotten involved in the Autism Association? I don't know. We've gotten really involved with Special Olympics. There was a Training for Life campus that was built in Jefferson City, Missouri about I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. It's a state-of-the-art facility. I was on the campaign committee to help raise money for that, and so did my part there and so forth. But nonetheless, I just want to see other people do well. I want to see, uh, I love getting out to the stores too and visiting with customers. Uh, I love selling things. I still make, some collection calls, sales calls. I don't really do deliveries anymore because physically I just can't. I got a kind of a little bit of an issue with my heart, but so physically can't really lift stuff like I used to. But I just I want to do my best to represent our company in a first class manner that my dad would be proud of, and give back to our community and make other people's lives better.
Well, I think you're doing a great job, John, and I'm glad that you're here on this Legends podcast talking about Tiger John Cleek. John Cleek Jr., thank you so much for coming on and just having us today to be able to talk about this and all the things that you've been through, how much he really meant to this industry and everything. Guys, I want to tell you, I really appreciate you stopping in and listening. Listen, if you have any questions or you want to be on the podcast and talk about some of the legends, hit me up, Pete at the RTOshowpodcast.com. You can also go to the website, www.thertoshowpodcast.com. You can go on there, buy some swag. It really helps out the show. Make sure you subscribe. You can see us on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube where you're going to see this. And I'm going to tell you guys, as always, John, thank you so much for being here. Tell Heather I said hello. Hopefully I'll get to see them this year coming up. I really hope I get a chance to do that again. The traveling this year is going to be a little bit different, but thank you so much for being on the show. And I'm going to tell you guys, as always, get your collections low to get your sales high. Have a great one.